Imagine standing atop a New York empire, only to discover its glittering foundations are built on lies. Julian Vance, a titan of industry, seemingly had it all: immense power, blinding wealth, and a picture-perfect life. But when a monumental business deal, his crowning achievement, begins to unravel, it exposes a treacherous web of deceit spun by the very hands he trusted most: his ambitious wife, Isabelle, and his charismatic partner, Marcus Thorne. With an unexpected young informant revealing a single damning clue, Julian is thrust into a desperate fight against a conspiracy darker than his worst nightmares. Could he unmask the traitors before everything he built crumbles? Prepare to witness Julian Vance's ultimate battle for truth, survival, and the very soul of his empire as we delve into this chilling tale. The pulse of New York City throbbed beneath Julian Vance's penthouse office, a symphony of ambition and relentless energy that usually mirrored his own. At 42, Julian was the architect of a financial technology empire, a titan in a world that bowed to his acumen. Power, unimaginable wealth, a life meticulously crafted to gleam with perfection. He possessed it all. But tonight, the city's buzz felt less like a chorus and more like a discordant omen. A monumental deal, one that promised to catapult Vance Industries into an entirely new stratosphere, was morphing from a golden opportunity into a labyrinth of chilling uncertainty. His wife, Isabelle, a woman whose elegance was as renowned as Julian's business prowess, had been an unwavering champion for this contract. Her voice, usually a silken melody, had taken on a sharper, more insistent edge whenever the Thorne Dynamics merger arose. "Julian, darling," she'd cooed over countless dinners, her eyes glittering with a fervor that seemed to look past the complexities, focusing solely on the dazzling rewards. "This is our legacy. Don't let doubt cloud your brilliance." But her eagerness, her almost desperate push to sign, now felt less like support and more like a silken noose tightening around his judgment. And then there was Marcus Thorne, the charismatic, almost predatory head of Thorne Dynamics, a man whose reputation was a carefully constructed veneer over whispers of ruthless tactics. Could this trusted, almost revered figure in the industry, a man Julian was considering as a partner, be orchestrating his downfall? The thought was a venomous serpent coiling in the pit of Julian's stomach. Just as the shadows of suspicion threatened to engulf him, a flicker of unexpected light emerged. Lily Carter, the quiet, observant 12-year-old daughter of his meticulous head of cleaning, Eleanor, approached him one evening. Her small hand clutched a crumpled piece of paper, her eyes wide with a gravity that belied her youth. She pointed to an almost invisible annotation on a discarded draft of the Thorne contract, a detail so minute, so cleverly obscured, that Julian, in his whirlwind of high-stakes negotiations, had completely overlooked it, a detail that could unravel the entire charade. Who was this child, really? And how, in a world of corporate giants and high finance, did she possess the key to a secret that could shatter his world? The truth, Julian was beginning to realize, was a far more terrifying beast than he could ever have conceived. Would he survive this ultimate betrayal, or would the cost be everything he held dear? Julian Vance, a man accustomed to the unyielding geometry of success, strode into his office. The Manhattan skyline, a testament to human ambition, sprawled outside his panoramic window. He'd sculpted his empire from raw intellect and sheer will, a kingdom demanding unwavering precision, absolute control. Confidence was Julian's armor, yet it often tipped into a steely arrogance. He prided himself on his insular judgment, a fortress against the fallibility of others. As CEO of Vance Industries, a multi-billion-dollar corporation, Julian navigated a daily gauntlet of critical decisions. Meetings bled into marathon calls, Deals were forged in the crucible of pressure. But the Thorne Dynamics contract had become a persistent, gnawing entity. Marcus Thorne offered a deal so lucrative it felt almost mythical, a game-changer that could redefine his company's future. Yet, an undeniable dissonance hummed beneath Thorne's polished charm. The documents arrayed on his expansive mahogany desk felt like pieces of an elaborate, beautiful, yet ultimately deceptive puzzle. Each clause, each projection, seemed almost too flawless, too effortlessly aligned. His gut, an instinct honed by years in the corporate jungle, screamed a familiar warning. If it appears too good to be true, it invariably is. Julian had learned through scars unseen by the world that the battlefield of business offered no quarter for missteps. Every maneuver demanded cold, hard calculation. The numbers whispered sweet promises, but he wasn't ready to plunge into the abyss without unearthing more definitive answers. His phone vibrated, a sharp intrusion into his focused turmoil. Isabelle. "Julian, how much longer must I endure this waiting game?" Her voice, though strained through the phone, dripped with impatience. "We're on the precipice of losing this, Julian. This is the key to the life we've always envisioned, the one we deserve." Julian's jaw clenched. Isabelle's ambition was a relentless force, constantly urging him towards grander, more opulent horizons. This contract, for her, wasn't merely about corporate expansion. It was the gateway to an amplified lifestyle, the limitless wealth, the intoxicating luxury, the envy of their social sphere. The pressure, her insistent words echoing in the sterile perfection of his office, felt like a physical weight. For weeks, she had been a siren, luring him towards the glittering rocks of this deal. Isabelle, he reflected, with a pang of disillusionment, had little appetite for the gritty minutiae of business. Her gaze was fixed firmly on the prize, the money, the status, the endless tapestry of extravagant vacations. They had been married for a decade, their initial bond forged in shared dreams and genuine affection. Now, it seemed their only remaining tether was ambition, predominantly her ambition. He placed the phone down, his fingertips drumming a restless rhythm on the cool wood. The burden of the decision was immense. Isabelle's expectations had always been stratospheric, but lately they felt suffocating. She was no longer just his wife. She had become his co-pilot in a relentless pursuit of affluence and recognition, a race he increasingly felt reluctant to run. When Julian finally arrived at their penthouse that evening, the city's lights had dissolved into a soft, impressionistic blur against the inky canvas of the night sky. He stepped into their home, a space designed to be a sanctuary of modern elegance, but which lately felt more like a gilded, silent cage. Isabelle was in the open-plan kitchen, a vision of grace as she orchestrated dinner. The subtle, aromatic blend of herbs and roasting meat wafted through the air. As always, she greeted him with a smile, but tonight it felt manufactured. A subtle, almost imperceptible tension lurked in her eyes, an unnerving edge to her voice as she placed a crystal glass of deep crimson wine before him. "How was your day, my love?" she inquired, her tone a little too saccharine, a little too rehearsed. Julian exhaled, a long, weary sound. "The usual," he clipped, shrugging off his bespoke jacket. "Long hours, endless meetings, and now this." He rubbed his temples, the fatigue of the day settling heavily upon him. His mind was a frantic carousel of contract clauses, financial projections, and that persistent, growing unease. Isabelle, seemingly oblivious to his shadowed expression, continued her culinary performance. She rarely noticed the subtle storms that raged within him anymore. "I've prepared your favorite pan-seared duck breast," she announced, her voice laced with a hopeful lilt, a plea he had come to recognize. It was her silent entreaty for him to shed the day's burdens, to indulge her carefully curated vision of domestic bliss and shared success. But Julian wasn't ready to surrender, not yet. He watched her as she moved, the elegant precision in every gesture as she set the table. It was a familiar tableau, yet tonight it only deepened his disquiet. Isabelle had always been this way, impeccably focused on appearances, on what they could possess, on what she believed they were entitled to. But a chasm was opening between them. He was no longer certain he desired the same gilded future. He took his seat at the table, his fingers unconsciously tracing the rim of his wineglass. A profound sense of an unseen, crucial missing piece plagued him, a feeling he couldn't articulate, let alone shake. "Have you signed the contract yet, Julian?" Isabelle's question, though delivered with a deceptive lightness, landed with an impact that made his heart stumble. She had been waiting for this, for the moment he would finally yield to her will. Julian hesitated, setting his glass down with deliberate slowness. He was weary of this relentless push and pull, tired of shouldering the weight of every monumental decision. "I'm not signing it yet, Isabelle," he stated, his voice firm. "I need more time. There are aspects that still don't feel right." Her smile faltered, just for a breath, but it was enough to send a palpable wave of tension rippling through the room. "Time?" she repeated, her voice now stripped of its earlier warmth, becoming clipped and sharp. "Julian, we've dissected this for weeks. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity, and you're still hesitating." Her words were like shards of ice, but Julian held his ground. "I understand the stakes, Isabelle, but I need absolute certainty. There are too many variables, too many unanswered questions." He looked at her then, truly looked at her, the perfect coiffure, the flawless makeup, the designer dress that whispered of understated expense. Beneath it all, however, he saw a woman consumed by an insatiable hunger for more, a woman unafraid to push him to his breaking point. He loved her, or at least he loved the memory of the woman she once was. But tonight, a chilling question began to form. Did he even truly know who she was anymore? The conversation, as it so often did, ended in an impasse. Isabelle, armed with her unwavering insistence. Julian, anchored by his burgeoning doubts. He pushed his plate away, his appetite extinguished by the crushing weight of the decision. The contract, Marcus Thorne, Isabelle. Everything felt as though it were spiraling into a vortex beyond his control. Julian rose, excusing himself from the table, intending to retreat to the sanctuary of his study. As he turned to leave, Isabelle's voice, once again smooth and polished, called after him. "Don't forget to call Marcus, Julian. We need this deal. For us." He nodded, a hollow gesture. The knot in his stomach tightened. Something about Thorne, about the entire edifice of this deal, felt fundamentally, dangerously off. Was he merely overthinking, succumbing to paranoia? Or was his reluctance a lifeline, a warning he ignored at his peril? As Julian walked towards his study, the oppressive weight of the situation clung to him like a shroud. His phone buzzed again. Thorne. The moment of reckoning was fast approaching. Julian Vance sat engulfed by the deepening shadows of his study, the only illumination the focused beam of his desk lamp, casting stark relief on the stacks of paperwork before him. The Thorne Dynamics contract, once presented as a beacon of unprecedented opportunity, now felt like a loaded weapon. The numbers, previously so alluring, now seemed to taunt him with their superficial perfection. The clauses, once merely complex, now felt insidious. His fingers, usually so steady, trembled slightly as he lifted the weighty document. He'd read these pages countless times, but tonight, they revealed themselves in a new, sinister light. A discrepancy in a minor subclause, a detail so seemingly trivial it had initially escaped his scrutiny, now snagged his attention like a burr. The more he stared at it, the more it pulsed with wrongness. It was a signature, almost hidden at the bottom of an addendum, a scrawl that was definitively not his own. The date, too, seemed off, too neat, too perfectly aligned with a timeline that didn't quite match his own memory of events. His breath hitched. He began to flip through the pages with increasing urgency, his eyes scanning, hunting for other signs of an unwelcome intrusion. And then he found it, another signature, starkly alien, appended to a critical indemnity clause. A wave of icy dread washed over him. The contract wasn't just flawed, it was a forgery, a sophisticated, meticulously crafted deception. Someone had dared to counterfeit his mark, and the entire deal was an elaborate, dangerous sham. His mind reeled. How had this insidious detail slipped past his rigorous scrutiny? How had Marcus Thorne, a man he was on the verge of trusting with the future of his company, managed such a brazen act? Or was this something larger, a conspiracy with tendrils reaching further than he could imagine? A soft, hesitant knock echoed through the oppressive silence, startling him. He looked up, his heart still hammering, as Lily Carter, the 12-year-old daughter of his diligent head of cleaning, Eleanor, stepped tentatively into the room. She looked nervous, but clutched a small folded sheaf of papers, her young face etched with an anxiety that belied her years. "Mr. Vance," she began, her voice a mere whisper, but imbued with an undeniable steadiness. I think I found something. Something you really need to see." Julian, still trying to process the implications of the forged signatures, gestured for her to approach. As she drew nearer, Lily shyly extended the papers. His pulse leaped as he recognized them. Internal memos, drafts he hadn't seen in their final form, documents that should have been securely filed, not hidden away in the recesses of a rarely used storeroom. "My mom, Eleanor," Lily explained, her gaze earnest. "She noticed something odd when she was organizing the archives last week. She wasn't sure what to make of it, didn't want to cause trouble. But then, when she overheard some talk about the Thorne deal and saw some preliminary drafts with signatures that looked hurried, she remembered these." Julian's focus sharpened as he absorbed the contents of Lily's offering. His suspicions, previously formless anxieties, now solidified into cold, hard certainty. Eleanor, with her quiet diligence, had stumbled upon discrepancies even before he had, but had hesitated, understandably fearful of the repercussions of voicing such grave concerns. She had sensed something was amiss, but hadn't dared to confront the Leviathan. Lily continued, explaining that her mother, deeply troubled, had discreetly gathered these anomalous documents, driven by a protective instinct she couldn't fully articulate. Eleanor, it seemed, had been trying to shield him from a danger she herself hadn't completely comprehended. "Mom's scared, Mr. Vance," Lily confided, her eyes wide with a child's unfiltered concern. "She thinks someone is trying to trick you. Badly." Julian leaned back in his chair, his mind a maelstrom. If Eleanor had unearthed this deception before him, it implied a conspirator with intimate access to his inner sanctum, someone who knew the intricate pathways of his business. The more he considered it, the more one figure loomed large in his thoughts. Isabelle, his wife. Her recent, almost frantic behavior, her uncharacteristic disinterest in the contractual details, her relentless pressure. Could she be complicit in this treacherous plot? Was Marcus Thorne the sole architect of this elaborate fraud, or was there a far more intimate betrayal at its core? Resolved to unearth the full extent of this conspiracy, Julian knew he had to proceed with extreme caution. He could trust no one now, not even, perhaps especially not, Isabelle. He had to become his own investigator, to meticulously unravel this web of deceit before it ensnared him completely. He began by dissecting every email, every financial projection, every piece of correspondence associated with Thorne and the ill-fated deal. The deeper Julian delved, the more apparent it became that Marcus Thorne was not a lone wolf. A pattern of deliberate oversight, strategically hidden clauses, and artfully vague language designed to mislead emerged. Thorne, he suspected, was merely a high-profile pawn in a much larger, more insidious game. His instincts, screaming louder now, pointed towards Isabelle's involvement. Her insistence on the deal, her constant reassurances for him to simply trust her, her sudden aversion to discussing specifics. It all painted a disturbing picture. But to what end? What could possibly motivate her to betray him so profoundly? Late one afternoon, as Julian was heading towards his car, a movement across the street, glimpsed through the rain-streaked window of a discreet cafe, stopped him dead in his tracks. The sight that unfolded made his heart plummet, a sickening lurch into a chasm of disbelief. Isabelle and Marcus Thorne. They were seated close, far too close for a professional acquaintance. Isabelle leaned in, her expression animated as she whispered something to Thorne, her hand resting with an unnerving intimacy on his arm. Thorne was laughing, a relaxed, unguarded expression that Julian had never witnessed. It was a fleeting, stolen moment, but the intensity, the unspoken familiarity was undeniable, a dagger twisting in Julian's gut. He froze, his mind scrambling, desperately seeking an alternative explanation, any explanation other than the one staring him in the face. He had always known Isabelle possessed an insatiable appetite for luxury, for the glittering accoutrements of wealth. But this was a betrayal of a different magnitude, a betrayal that sliced to the very core of his being. He had never, in his darkest imaginings, conceived that she could stoop to such treachery. His pulse thundered in his ears as he stood, rooted to the spot, unable to tear his gaze from the scene. A vice tightened around his chest, the bitter taste of betrayal flooding his senses. His wife, the woman with whom he had built his life, was sharing secrets and laughter with the very man he was beginning to suspect was trying to destroy him. Suddenly, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He fumbled for it, his hand shaking. A message from Isabelle. "We need to talk." Now. It was as if she sensed his discovery, as if she knew he had seen. But how? Had she been watching him? Had Thorne alerted her? His fingers trembled as he typed a terse reply. "Where are you?" The response was almost instantaneous. "I'm waiting for you at home. Please, Julian, come back." He stood there, staring at the message, his mind a battlefield of conflicting emotions. Confront her now, in the heat of his raw discovery? Pretend ignorance? Give her a chance to weave her own narrative? Or was it already too late, the damage irreparable? Julian arrived home late that evening, his mind a tempest. Isabelle was in the living room, pacing, her usual composure fractured by an undeniable anxiety. The moment she saw him, she rushed forward, her face a mask of carefully constructed concern. "Julian, I swear," she began, her voice trembling just enough to be perceptible. "It's not what you think." The guilt in her tone, however, was a dissonant undertone she couldn't quite conceal. "Then what is it, Isabelle?" Julian demanded, his voice glacial, devoid of its usual warmth. "Why were you with Marcus Thorne? What have you been hiding from me?" Isabelle looked down, her shoulders slumping in a gesture of defeat. She drew a deep, shuddering breath, as if steeling herself for an inevitable confession. When she finally spoke, Her words were laden with a toxic blend of regret and fear. "Marcus, he pressured me," she whispered, her eyes darting around the room as if seeking an escape. He said if I didn't help him convince you to sign the contract, he'd destroy everything. Our business, our reputation, our lives. It was the only way, Julian. The only way I could protect us. I didn't want to do it, but I thought it was the only way out." Julian's world fractured. The woman he had trusted above all others, the cornerstone of his carefully constructed life, had not only betrayed him, but had actively participated in a scheme designed to ruin him. The empire he had bled for, the life they had built, was crumbling around him, all because of her insatiable greed and devastating weakness. Milking Aimed. Audience engagement prompt as in original. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the interruption, but we hope you will help us improve our content in the future. Do you think Isabelle's actions were driven by fear, or was it pure greed? Would you have done the same in her position, or would you have taken a different approach? Oh. Julian Vance stood amidst the wreckage of his former life, his opulent office now feeling like a mausoleum of broken trust. The chaos that had engulfed him was slowly receding, replaced by a cold, hard determination. The empire he had so painstakingly built, his pride and his legacy, had been targeted, his trust systematically violated by the woman who shared his bed, Isabelle. But the unmasking was complete. There was no turning back. He had clawed his way to a truth that was darker, more dangerous, and more devastating than he could have imagined. With the astute and unexpectedly resilient Eleanor Carter now acting as his legal counsel, her quiet competence having proven invaluable, Julian had begun to meticulously piece together the jagged fragments of a vast, sinister conspiracy. Eleanor, transitioning from cleaning supervisor to a formidable legal ally with a previously undisclosed law degree she'd earned years ago, had accomplished what seasoned investigators had failed to do. She had navigated the digital labyrinth, unearthing encrypted files and veiled communications, connecting the dots between Marcus Thorne, Isabelle, and the shadowy criminal network that puppeted them. It was Eleanor sifting through terabytes of data with unwavering focus who uncovered the most staggering revelation. Marcus Thorne wasn't merely a ruthless businessman. He was a key operative, a sophisticated frontman for a sprawling criminal organization headed by the elusive Victor Sterling, a notorious crime lord who had masterfully evaded international law enforcement for decades. Julian's gut clenched as the horrifying reality crystallized. Thorne wasn't just attempting a corporate takeover. He was systematically using Vance Industries as a conduit for a massive money laundering operation, facilitating illegal arms trades and a litany of other nefarious activities. And Isabelle? It was sickeningly clear she had waded too deep into the treacherous currents of deceit and avarice to ever find her way back to shore. Julian had never envisioned the woman he loved, the mother of his, now estranged, children, becoming so hopelessly entangled in such a venomous web of corruption. But the time for shock and grief was over. It was time for retribution. Julian, with Eleanor as his unwavering strategist, prepared for the legal war of his life. They meticulously compiled every shred of evidence, damning contracts, incriminating emails, labyrinthine financial records, offshore account statements. They constructed an ironclad, irrefutable case against Marcus Thorne, Isabelle Vance, and, by extension, the Sterling Syndicate. They knew, however, that the path ahead was fraught with peril. The criminal network they were challenging was not one to be exposed without a vicious, brutal fight. As the case gained momentum, the threats began. Julian's phone became a conduit for cryptic messages, veiled warnings whispered by distorted voices. Eleanor, too, received unsettling calls, sometimes just heavy, menacing breathing, other times hushed voices delivering explicit instructions to abandon the investigation. But neither Julian nor Eleanor faltered. Their resolve, forged in betrayal and a shared pursuit of justice, was unbreakable. They were committed to seeing this through, irrespective of the personal cost. The trial date finally dawned, the air in the cavernous courtroom crackling with palpable tension. As Julian and Eleanor entered, they felt the weight of expectation, the silent acknowledgement that this was their ultimate stand. Marcus Thorne, impeccably dressed and seated across the aisle, projected an air of unshakable confidence, yet his eyes, when they fleetingly met Julian's, betrayed a flicker of raw, primal fear. He had fatally underestimated Julian Vance, and now Julian was poised to make him pay the ultimate price. Isabelle was there, too, a ghost of her former self, seated on the periphery of the courtroom, her face an unreadable frozen mask. She had maintained a stoic silence for weeks, and Julian had no idea what to expect from her now. Would she attempt to incriminate him further? Would she offer a desperate last-ditch justification for her actions? The trial was a brutal, protracted battle. Eleanor, with a prosecutor's precision and a victim's fury, led the charge. She systematically presented the irrefutable evidence, piece by painstaking piece, exposing Thorne and Isabelle as the architects of a monumental fraud. Julian sat in the gallery, his heart a relentless drum against his ribs, as each revelation further shattered the carefully constructed illusion of the life he had once cherished. Thorne attempted to deny, to deflect, to obfuscate, but the sheer weight of the evidence, the forged signatures, the hidden bank accounts, the damning timelines, was undeniable, a tidal wave of truth that swept away his lies. And Isabelle, she sat, head bowed, a portrait of shame, unable or unwilling to meet Julian's gaze. As the trial lurched towards its inevitable conclusion, Julian felt a profound sense of finality settle over him. The jury deliberated for what felt like an eternity, but Julian, in his heart, knew the outcome. He had fought for justice, for the unvarnished truth, and now it was time for that truth to prevail. When the foreman finally read the verdict, the words hung in the air, resonating with the weight of shattered lives and irretrievable losses. Marcus Thorne, Isabelle Vance, and, in absentia but implicated through overwhelming evidence, Victor Sterling, are found guilty on all counts. Conspiracy to commit fraud, wire fraud, and felony money laundering. The court sentences Marcus Thorne and Isabelle Vance to 10 years in federal prison, effective immediately. A wave of profound relief washed over Julian, swiftly followed by an unexpected hollow ache. He had won. Justice had been served. But the victory was bittersweet, tainted by the devastating cost. His marriage, his faith in human nature, the serene peace he had once taken for granted, all irrevocably gone. In the ensuing weeks and months, Julian, with Eleanor's steadfast guidance, began the arduous task of rebuilding Vance Industries from the ground up. The reputational and financial damage had been catastrophic, but he was determined to restore integrity to his name and his company. Eleanor, who had been his anchor throughout the entire ordeal, found her legal career unexpectedly revitalized. Her tenacity and brilliance in the Vance case had earned her a formidable reputation, and she dedicated herself to championing those who, like Julian, had been wronged by the powerful and corrupt. Julian, however, knew his journey was far from over. The business world had revealed its darkest, most predatory underbelly, but he refused to let it break his spirit. He had learned indelible lessons about trust, the corrosive nature of unchecked ambition, and the paramount importance of unwavering integrity. He vowed that his future success would never again come at the expense of his soul. One crisp evening, as Julian sat alone in his now starker, more functional office, gazing out at the glittering expanse of the city skyline, a sense of profound closure settled upon him. He had stared into the abyss and fought his way back. He had emerged scarred but stronger. As his eyes fell upon a framed photograph on a side table, a relic from his former life, Isabelle and him, radiant smiles against the backdrop of their palatial former home, a pang of sadness, a nostalgic ache for what was lost, resonated within him. The man he had been was gone, replaced by a new Julian Vance, one who would never again allow his kindness to be weaponized, his success to be manipulated. He picked up his phone and dialed Eleanor's number. She answered on the first ring, her voice calm and reassuring. "Eleanor," he began, a warmth infusing his tone, "I wanted to thank you, again, for everything. You didn't just help me win a case. You helped me reclaim myself." There was a brief pause on the other end before Eleanor spoke, her voice soft yet firm. "You're welcome, Julian. But remember, the real victory isn't just about winning. It's about how you choose to move forward from here. Never let the past define your future." Julian smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. A profound sense of gratitude, an emotion he hadn't truly felt in months, filled him. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he felt ready. Ready to face whatever the future held, armed with the hard-won wisdom of his ordeal. Julian's world was shattered, but he emerged stronger, wiser. What did you think of his ultimate transformation? Could you ever forgive a betrayal as deep as Isabelle's? Or was her greed simply unforgivable? And what about Eleanor, the quiet force who became his unlikeliest ally? We'd love to hear your thoughts and theories in the comments below. If you are gripped by Julian's fight for justice and want more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat, please show your support. Hit that like button, share this video with a friend who loves a good thriller, and most importantly, subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss our next gripping tale. Thanks for watching.